Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Kharkiv because probably the most important and interesting details are coming exactly from this territory. As you can see, we have adjusted the map. We have colored Korolenko Street and part of Korolenko Street and the part of Sobornoy Street under Russian control. During the previous few weeks the Ukrainians managed to restore control over this territory, but now the Russians managed to return these streets back again. And as you can see, according to geolocations, we have colored one building, the building number 33 along Sobornoy Street, and because according to information we have and geolocation we have, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the territory. And basically on the 30th of June the Russians began the, let's say, official battle for the citadel. Let's take a look at the video. In this, for example, video, we can see the Russian stormtroopers, the Russian Marines, who was running from one building to another under very heavy artillery fire, mortar fire. There were lots of explosions. If you have access to this video, you will be shocked but when you hear the machine gun works, sniper works, and many other things that Ukrainians were trying to use to slow down the Russians. Anyway, if we return back on map, we will see that the Russian soldiers started their movement somewhere here from this building, from the Vovchansk college, and then the Russians start moving along this, let's say, park, these buildings, and in this area the Russians entered the building by the name of 33 on Sobornoy Street, which confirms complete control over the territory. I'll remind you that just yesterday we talked about additional progress of the armed forces of Russian Federation between aggregating plant and let's say citadel itself. The Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were FPV droning the Russians with significant number of FPV drones, and the Russians answered and let's say answered and deployed armored vehicles, tanks and mechanized forces inside of the city. So what did happen exactly? For example, during the previous days we got a lot of geolocations along Koltsova Street. So basically by the end of the day the Russians managed to move their armored vehicles and their tanks to this street, to this intersection of the streets, and to establish complete control over this territory. On the other side, we know that the Russians control the northern part, and also the Russians established complete fire control over this territory as well. So basically the Ukrainians in the citadel appeared encircled from the south and from the north, and the Ukrainians lost any possibilities to be supported and supplied from the mainland. And during this period of time the Russians conducted an offensive along Gogol streets toward the citadel. So this is the situation, this is approximately the situation in the area. Obviously, if the Russians are able to take under control the citadel, this will allow them to enter the operational space of low-rise building and to finish the battle for Vovchansk completely. During the previous 24 hours and during the previous night, the Ukrainians continue making attempts to send additional reinforcements and reserves from the southern part in the northern direction, trying to force the Russians to slow down and to send some additional reserves in this direction. But the Russians see everything because the river is not so big. There are lots of reconnaissance drones, and as soon as the Russians see another batch of Ukrainian soldiers heading to the north, they start bombing them and attacking them. Also, as soon as the Russians see another engineering machine that the Ukrainians are planning to use to build pontoon bridge, the Russians destroy this also immediately. Just for the previous 24 hours, according to the Russian sources, the Ukrainians lost 25 soldiers during this process when sending from the south to the north. So the battle for Vovchansk is ongoing, but obviously we see that the situation develops completely in Russian favor. Now let's move further in the northern Kupyansk direction. During the previous night, according to the Russian sources, they managed to, let's say, to improve their positions between Sinkovka and Petropavlovka, and a few more strongholds and the shelters were captured by the Russians. For now, we don't have any geolocations confirming this. Now let's move to the southern Kupyansk direction because we have lots of very interesting details and updates from this territory. As you can see, we have some adjustments on map. The Russian sources published the video of how they were bombing the Ukrainian positions in Kryminaya forest. Lots of explosions, artillery strikes, FAB strikes, and in this video we can see another episode from the same area. So summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that during the previous 2-3 weeks the Ukrainians managed to conduct more or less successful counter-offensive operations, and as a result of those operations the Ukrainians managed to establish complete control at least over this part of Kryminaya forest, so basically over this stronghold. Different mappers, including pro-Ukrainian mappers, neutral mappers, and different centers, reported that also as a result of counteroffensive, let's return back. As a result of counteroffensive, the Ukrainians managed to restore their positions and to capture the positions along Seversky Donetsk River. So, summarizing everything, this is the Ukrainian progress. This is another Ukrainian progress, and I'll remind you that just 2 days ago we discussed that Ukrainians also restored control over this part of the Kryminaya forest. So, summarizing everything, we see that Ukrainians are moving from the western direction in the eastern, trying to improve their positions and trying to reduce the risks of their situation in Serebryanka and Grigorovka. Because during the previous days, during the previous months, the Russians captured Bilogorovka. Now the Russians are trying to cut these artillery pockets, this one, and as soon as they do this, they will continue moving further in Grigorovka and Serebryanka direction. This is the reason why the forces of 12th separate Azov, Special Purpose Brigade Azov, started their offensive, trying to improve their positions and not to allow the Russians to get very close to Grigorovka. So they just want to secure the northern part, the northern flank of Serebryanka and Grigorovka. Also, a reminder that yesterday we got the video how the Ukrainians were attacking in this area as well. So very interesting details. So something big is happening here. For now, the situation as for Kryminaya forest develops completely in Ukrainian favor. Now let's move further in direction of Chasiv Yar. During the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything, just few 2-hour strikes in the most western buildings in the eastern Chasiv Yar. I'll remind you that just yesterday we discussed that as a result of another attack, the Russians managed to enter this citadel as well and to capture at least one building also. So the clashes is ongoing. The Russians are bombing the Ukrainian positions, trying to force them to fall back or to prepare the foothold before further offensive and assault operation. Now we're moving further in direction of Toretsk, New York agglomeration. Today we have just small report from pro-Russian mapper who confirms also that the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt and to capture the territory. The only difference that we can see on his map in comparison with different, let's say, pro-Ukrainian mappers or neutral mappers is that he says that the Russians were attacking the Ukrainian positions, let's say, using this route of attack, and that the territory of the landfill, this landfill Terikon and coal mine, is under complete Ukraine control. So he says that the situation is something like this, and of course this is very important adjustment, very important, let's say, a detail, because according to pro-Ukrainian sources and neutral mappers, the Russians were attacking using another completely different routes of attack. The Russians, according to different mappers, were attacking something like this. So we'll see, of course, very soon who is correct, who is right, but for now we are going to keep the area as is. Today we got also very important, probably one of the most important video for the previous night, is another use of FAB 3000. I'll remind you that during the previous days the Russians mainly were using FAB 3000 on Liptsy direction. There were a lot of explosions inside of this village. And we discussed that the Russians are limited in the numbers of aircrafts that can carry FAB 3000, and that's why we discussed that this machine is not able to change the, let's say, the entire course of the special military operation, but this machine, Su-34, that can carry FAB 3000, is able to change situation at least on one direction. And today we got the first video from New York, which was very interesting and something very weird, because it's too far from the Kharkiv direction. And to bomb New York with FAB 3000, first of all, the Russians need to redeploy their aircrafts somewhere in the vicinity of Donetsk or maybe Lugansk. So this is the first use of FAB 3000 in the area of responsibility of Group of Forces Center, and this video confirms that if the Russians start using FAB 3000 in this direction, that means that the Russians are planning to fight for New York and Toretsk during, let's say, summer military campaign, and they're very, very focused, and they are very, very serious in this direction, and they will try to finish the battle, because now they're using everything they have, every type of caliber they have. As for the western Avdiivka direction, the Russians, starting these previous days, began artillery preparation in direction of Vovchansk. We have the map of fire anomalies, lots of, as you can see, fire anomalies, which confirms that the Russians are bombing the territory, the rear positions of the armored forces of Ukraine, and most likely during the next few days, or maybe today, the Russians Russians will make first attempts to attack and to storm Vozdvizhenka itself. It's a very important town. If the Russians are able to take under control, then they will cut or establish fire control over the main supply road between Pokrovsk and Konstantinovka. Now we're moving further. We have additional updates from Krasnogorovka itself. Today, pro-Ukrainian sources reported that the Ukrainians began abandoning their positions from the west-eastern Krasnogorovka, from the citadel, Krasnogorovka citadel, and from Krasnogorovka hospital. So which means that the battle for Krasnogorovka is about to be finished, and that the days of the rest of this town are numbered. Also, we have some activity of the Russians in the line between Malotokmachka, Orechov, Robotina, Verbova. The Russians become very active in this direction. Maybe they're planning to continue moving further in the northern direction from Robotina and Verbova to Novodanilovka. Very difficult to understand, but we see the activity, so let's see what is going to be next. And that's it for today for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.